So, Steve, you're the entrepreneur guy, but before you were an entrepreneur, you were in the military, right?
Yes.
What did you do?
I ended up volunteering for the Air Force during Vietnam and spent a year and a half in Southeast Asia learning electronics. Is how I ended up in Silicon Valley, electronic intelligence, electronic warfare. And when I got out, long story, but ended up in the Valley in the mid-1970s when we were still selling equipment to other businesses. There was no consumer electronics business. And also there was a very strong component of defense in Silicon Valley at the time, and still is. Lockheed was the largest employer, made all our submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and built our first and second generation of intelligence gathering satellites. And I worked for a startup run by someone named Bill Perry, who was a PhD mathematician, but ended up eventually as the Secretary of Defense. And so my introduction to the Valley was through what I would call a halfway house between startups and the military.
The one thing you said, you volunteered during Vietnam. Yeah. Not a lot of, was this so you wouldn't get drafted to go do something worse, or were you just masochistic? Or what?
So actually, there's if anybody's been in the military, the #1 rule is never volunteer for anything. And actually, my entire career in life has been in violation of that rule. I have volunteered for everything. And I found as an entrepreneur that 80% of the game is showing up more than anybody else. And so, when, in fact, I got stationed in my first base just outside of Miami. It was the cushiest base in the Air Force. And someone came into the shop literally the first week before I ever got to touch an airplane. And they said, anybody want to go to the war zone? And I raised my hand. And the rest of my career has been like that, is I tended to pick, for startups, the most toughest technical challenges that were also people thought were incredibly outnumbered by competitors or surrounded and whatever. And I found those incredibly fascinating because #1, people never thought you had any odds of succeeding, and if you did, it was considered a miracle win. And B, you got incredible opportunity both in learning technology, but in doing things that no one else would think you were capable of doing. So I did 8 startups, 2 microprocessor startups, supercomputers, enterprise software, video games, etc. And the only common theme was attention deficit disorder.